Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Music Den. I'm your host, Armando Venditti. Hoping you guys are having a good night and above all else that you're looking after yourselves and one another. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get into the topic of the show, I want to welcome back to the channel Mr. Jim Bricker. How's it going, Jim?
Doing fine. Bonjour, my friend. Bonjour.
Bonjour. Bonjour. So
That is the extent of my French.
there we go. There we go. Pretty much here too. So can't go any further than that. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk some Genesis, shall we?
We
Specifically,
shall.
The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Specifically, the reason for this episode is that The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway is celebrating its 50th anniversary.
50
The
years old.
yes.
I remember that.
The album was released on November 22nd, 1974, through Charisma Records in the UK and Atlantic and Ico Records in North America. It is the band's sixth album, a double album, a concept album, no less. This album also marks the final recording of Peter Gabriel as frontman of Genesis. Now, the album itself was recorded, the material for the album, I should say, sorry, was recorded at places like Headley Grange, which, if you're familiar with Headley Grange, is pretty much, at the time, it was pretty much a dilapidated manor. Uh, Other bands have recorded there, such as Led Zeppelin, most notably Deep Purple. And that place has a history of possibly being haunted. Um, it's been well documented. Steve Hackett has mentioned it in documentaries that he was quite certain that the place was haunted.
Yeah.
Um, and also Robert Plant has stated as such to Steve Hackett in private conversations. Also, the album music for the album was recorded at Island Studios. This was quite an ambitious project. Um, I do believe that it was spearheaded by Peter Gabriel. During the recording of the album, there were tensions that were going on within the group. Um, how can I put this? A lot of drama went down, okay? In terms of Peter Gabriel, he uh, had the birth of his first daughter occur, and she was in a precarious state health wise. So he was driving from being with his wife when she was in the hospital back to going, back to Headley Grange where the band were recording and rehearsing and writing. And the band, according to Peter Gabriel and according to members of the band, Mike Rutherford, etc., had said that they were not exactly supportive of him during this time. They felt that he was, spending too much time with his family. The man just had a kid, he just had a baby girl, and she was not in good health. Okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think his wife was the one who was in some pretty difficult health following the birth, and I think the
yes,
the baby probably had a bit of distress too.
yes, his wife Jill was given an epidural with a dirty needle before the birth, so that caused the issues. Also, during the recording, Peter Gabriel was approached by William Friedkin, who at the time had just released The Exorcist a year before. Don't won't even go there. Now, um,
Well,
the
he was
reason
approached by Friedkin because
to
Friedkin wanted to kind of he had read the story that
on
well,
the
I'm
back
going to
of
go.
the
If you're
letter.
not going to go there, I'm going to go there.
No, I'll
So
go
he
there. Go there.
all
I'm
right.
going to
So
go there.
Friedkin had read the story that Peter Gabriel put together that was the back of the album of the Genesis Live
Yes,
1973, and he was
yes.
sort of curiously inspired to see what sort of cinematic things could be wrought by a combination with Peter Gabriel. And I think they met and talked for a couple of weeks, but nothing ever went anywhere. So he
Yes,
shuffled back to
and
Genesis. At least that's how I recall it.
yes, and at the time, the band had also said to him, "You either stay with the band and work on this project, or you go and work with William Friedkin. You can't have both."
Yeah.
So Peter Gabriel at one point did leave the band during the recording of the material for The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Uh, William Friedkin, upon hearing about this, freaked out, saying, I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't want to break the band up. I don't even know if this idea of mine is going to work. Incidentally, this idea, this theatrical idea that William Friedkin had, he had also asked Tangerine Dream to record the soundtrack for this possible project that was going to happen, which never did come to fruition. Now, Peter Gabriel, upon the idea falling through with William Friedkin, returns back to Genesis to continue the recording of the album. But at this point, just a little sidebar, at this point, the other members of Genesis knew full well that Peter Gabriel could leave at any given time. Okay, so the foundation of the band was getting really shaky, and going forward, all right, I'm not sure if it was going forward from that point, but Peter Gabriel decided to write all the lyrics for all the songs,
Hmm.
which, according to Tony Banks, created uh, a, a one-sided story in terms of the narrative of the story. And Tony Banks has gone on record as saying that he is not especially fond of this album in terms of the story that goes with the album. Okay. Now, the story for the album, in a condensed version, and then I'll shut up for a bit, is the story of Rail, a Puerto Rican in New York City who goes on a journey of self discovery. Okay. That is it in a nutshell. What unfolds over the next 23 tracks? Hell, I don't even know. I can't even, make heads or tails of it. So
Yep.
we're going to discuss the album. Okay. So passing the virtual mic over to Jim. What was your first experience with this album? When did you first sort of sit down and listen to it in its entirety?
Well, yeah, my first exposures to it were from FM radio, just from the tracks, the title track and Carpet Crawlers. Um, when Three Sides Live came out, that was my exposure to In the Cage and Slipperman. But I didn't have a proper sit down with the album until probably 84 or so, maybe 85,
Yeah.
um, in college. And it was it's a pretty crazy experience to listen to this album. It's great in how expansive it is and how creative it is. Um, I think that the first half of it holds up better than the second half, but overall, I think it's an incredibly strong album from Genesis. And even though Peter is solely responsible for the lyrics, frankly, it probably helped because if they wanted to have, a double album that the fans would sit through, you would need probably some sort of consistent narrative flow to take the listener all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And even as bizarre as this is, I mean, um, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at Wikipedia while I'm talking to you, and it says that Gabriel was inspired by a variety of sources for the story, including a West Side Story, a kind of punk twist to Pilgrim's Progress, the works of psychologist Carl Jung, the surrealistic film El Topo by
Yeah.
Alejandro Jodorowsky, which I understand that Gabriel spent a lot of time with when they were in New York.
Yes.
Um, we saw that, several times.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all of those things sort of combined together to kind of do this, you know, uh, Alice in Wonderland that's not on acid, but it might as well could have
Damn
been. It's
near.
just very strange.
Damn near. Yeah. It is an expansive album. I mean, I should say, I forgot to mention that it clocks in at 94 minutes and 17 seconds. So it's quite long for an album of at that time. And upon release, it reached number 10 in the UK charts and number 41 in the US charts. Now, the album, um, as I failed to mention at the top of the show, was produced by John Burns and the band. Um, yeah. The, whew, and
Where to begin?
it should be noted too that the band took this album on tour and played it in its entirety. They performed 100 shows of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway in total, and Phil Collins can remember that only 4 out of the 100 shows where everything went perfectly because they had slide projections and the whole bit, and only um, 4 out of the 100 performances, sorry, were all the projections timed perfectly, right? Because it was a new medium for them to do this at the time and stuff. Um,
Right. And not only did they have the slides, but they had, of course, Peter's costumes. They had a bunch of strange lighting effects going on. They
yeah,
had these weird, I don't know what you call the special effect of the cone that they
yes,
had during the Lamia and just all the different things. The Slipper Man costume, for crying out loud. I mean, yeah, this thing was like Spinal Tap in terms of
yeah,
anything that could go wrong, will,
yeah, and Peter Gabriel coming out of that in that costume out of a giant inflatable penis. I mean, it was just like,
as you do.
of course. I mean that's my Friday night ritual for God's sake.
Well,
Um,
now let's keep your proclivities to yourself,
but
young
no, I
man.
mean that's just a common thing, right? Everybody does that once in a while.
In
Um,
75, everyone was, never mind.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. My first exposure to this album, I gotta tell you, I do remember hearing The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, the track, on FM radio as a kid. And if I'm not mistaken, I do remember hearing it just around the time it actually came out, like in 74, 75. And um, yeah. Um, musically, I think it, well, let me backtrack for a sec. The reason why I bought it, bought the album, was I went on a bit of a shopping spree, and I came home one day with the entire Genesis catalog. When HMV was around in North America, and I walked out of there with like $150 worth of CDs in one shot, and The Lamb was one of the albums in the catalog that I bought, and I sat down and listened to it. I couldn't get it. Aside from certain songs like The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway and In the Cage, um, Carpet Crawlers, which was to be a single, uh, but the rest of the album I could not make heads or tails of.
Well, yeah, sure. Given the source material that Gabriel says he references, I mean, my goodness, it's hard to have something immediately identifiable and cohesive sort of to come from that, extreme gumbo of references there.
Yeah,
It's amazing to me as well is that, people kind of forget the rapidness with which bands put out material back in those days. I mean, Genesis, they finished their Selling England by the Pound tour in January. They took a break for until about May and then started to kick around ideas for what they wanted to do. They wrote it in June and July and then recorded it August through October. And then they went on the road in November and the album released November 22nd. I mean, this was a pretty quick turn,
yeah,
especially if you consider the track record that Peter Gabriel had with albums, you know, from the 90s on.
yeah.
Um, very, very slow, like Molasses in January slow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're talking about a time period where bands, I mean, I've said this before on other shows, bands during the late 60s and, no, actually the 60s into the 70s signed record contracts where they were obligated to release 2 albums a year. and release a single every 30 days. So you're talking about a lot of pressure that these bands, either the management or the record companies put on them or they put on themselves to come up with viable material to write, record, and promote. That is a
Hmm.
lot. That is a
Yeah.
lot. So yeah, it was a quick turnaround. And I mean, they had a major, well, their fortunes were improving with the release of, Selling England by the Pound. Fantastic album. Uh, this album, I don't know. I mean, side one is fantastic. Like
Yep.
each track flows effortlessly. It's great, you know. You have the Tower track and other songs like Fly in a Windshield, uh Broadway medley of 74, Cuckoo Cocoon, In the Cage, and the Grand Parade of Lifeless Packaging. That's side one. Okay. Suppose I said that last title really fast. Didn't trip over myself there. As I look at my notes here, side two, you know, my God, back in New York City, Hellish Heart, Counting Out Time, which was supposed to be the lead off single for the album, but their handlers around them and management said no, Carpet Crawlers is a single, and they didn't see it as a single. Carpet Crawlers is on side two, and then it ends with the Chamber of 32 Doors. You know,
Yeah, I
The-
think that first disc, if you will, of the two disc release is pretty perfect. I mean, when we did our 31 perfect albums thing, I seriously considered the Lamb for a while because the first disc is just so perfect in terms of its flow, in terms of how it's telling the story, in terms of just how it starts and ends. I mean, the Chamber of 32 Doors has such a perfect ending,
Mhm.
to sort of almost daring the listener. It's like, okay, are you ready to put on the second album? Because we've teed this whole thing up for you for some, epic conclusion. And
Exactly.
and yeah, I just the whole way that album one is put together is just fantastic. And a lot of that has to go, credit goes to the tune writing, not the lyrics. So, between Rutherford Banks, Phil, and Steve, what they put together in terms of the music that Peter put the lyrics to is just some fantastic stuff there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what,
Um,
I've wondered this, Armando, you might know the answer to this.
Go on.
For tunes like Hairless Heart, excuse me, where it's just a full instrumental,
Yeah.
I'm wondering how many of the pieces like that, and you get a couple more examples of that on the second disc,
Yeah.
are there because um, they knew they needed to pad it out to do the stage presentation, or
Yeah.
if they were really just focused on the music part of it. I mean, do you have an idea? Is it form follows function or what?
I I think it is form follows function. I think, they could have possibly thought, you know what, it doesn't hurt to have a an extended musical interlude at this point and just to sort of just to keep going. I mean, there's a lot of information here on this album lyrically.
Yeah,
So maybe
yeah.
they were thinking, maybe we need to just take a bit of a break, for the Hairless Heart section and piece. It's 2 minutes and 10 seconds. I mean, it's not very long
No, it's not
in
long, and but
totality.
and it's a great palate cleanser.
Yeah, yeah, especially for back in New York City, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it segues beautifully into the Carpet Crawlers. And
Counting out time.
sorry, sorry, I jumped ahead. Yeah, you're right. Counting Out Time, which, ladies and gentlemen, you know, it's a song about sexual intercourse. You know what I mean? An adolescent that
Better
is,
buy a book before it's too late.
there you go. There you go. Um, but And it's kind of funny because they looked at that track, Counting Out Time, as more of a pop oriented type of a track.
That's
Uh,
just wild.
and they in Tony Banks thought that that would have been the single, but again, their handlers thought, you know what? No, 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 we gotta go for Corporate Crawlers. And that track has become an audience favorite. It's become it's developed like a cult following. It's been released a couple of times as a single, and it's bombed each time that it's been released as a single. I love that track. Um,
Hmm.
I love the fact that the drum pattern stays the same, but the other instruments like the keyboards and the guitars, etc., speed up towards the end, from the middle towards the ending of it. I just think it's amazing. And his vocals are just steady, very low key, and it builds and builds and builds, right?
Right.
Towards the end. But yeah, what to say about this album? I do think you're right. I do think that disc one or album one is flawless. It works so well. Where would you, if anything, pardon the pun, trim the fat on this?
Well, I think I would have put that attention towards disc two. Um, I know there's lots of there's lots of online discussions like do the Beatles White Album as a single disc and do the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway as a single disc. Um, I don't think you can for the Lamb because it would just lose way too much of the story
Yeah.
to take a bunch of stuff out. Having said that, there's things like Ravine and to a degree Silent Sorrow and Empty Boats that maybe you could get rid of. I think Silent Sorrow and both of those tunes sort of bookend Colony of Slippermen, which, as we discussed before, has Peter coming out in this outrageous costume, coming out in a very outrageous way. And my
Yeah,
guess is that this is the form follows function part where, you need to have Silent Sorrow there so he can get into the freaking costume. And you need Ravine so he can get out of the freaking costume. Um,
that's just it. And yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I
yeah,
like Some Sorrow and Empty Boats.
I do too. And
I
because I
yeah.
think it's a nice coming as it does out of the Lamia and what's talked about there, it's a good rite of passage to sort of get you into the fourth part of the story, and I think it accomplishes it pretty well. But in trying to think about like where things possibly could be trimmed, my my mind always goes to those instrumentals because um, they're they're good, but they're not essential.
Mhm, mhm. Well, hmm. For me, what I like about Silent Sorrow and Empty Boats is the choir vocals that come in,
Oh yeah, I'm guessing
right?
that's all banks on the Mellotron there.
Could be, could be.
Could be.
Again, there is mellotron dripping on this album, dripping,
Exactly.
from the ceiling to the floor, right down the walls. And thank you, Tony Banks, for that. Um,
Yeah.
I, you know, eh, hmm, no, I agree with you that I agree with you. I tend to think that the instrumentals do get a bit of a bad rap.
Hmm.
It's like Pink Floyd The Wall. David Gilmour has said that to him, that album lacks a certain amount of soul, right?
Okay.
And that side three he could do without, with the exception of Comfortably Numb. Of course, he's saying that because he gets a co-write, you know,
Yep.
you know,
Sure.
priorities, ladies and gentlemen. You know what I'm trying to say? It's very,
Money.
there you go. There you go. And it's a crime.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think that if you trim the fat, as it were,
Hmm.
you do with this album, especially because all the songs are interlinked, right? There is
Yes.
a storyline going through it. And I think that
As
if you
impenetrable as it is, there is a storyline.
exactly, well, again, I still, okay, a story about a young Puerto Rican in New York City who goes on a journey of self-discovery. That's kind of vague, isn't it? I mean, like, hello. I mean,
It's
where's
yeah,
the
it's like
meat?
calling Citizen Kane, story about a kid in a sled. Doesn't do it. Doesn't do it at
Exactly,
all.
exactly. It's like, where's the meat and potatoes here? You know what I mean? Where is the stuff that binds it together in terms of in terms of the,
Yeah.
of the storyline, in terms of the
It,
story
it's a
itself?
gross simplification.
Yeah, very much so. I will say I've listened to the album since we discussed about doing this episode. I've listened to the album twice, uh,
Hmm.
front to back. I'm still lost. God forgive me. Please don't strike me down that on the storyline. But musically, it is good. It
Oh
is
yeah.
really good. Um, in terms of the album itself, in terms of the music, it's some of their best work.
Oh yeah. I mean, we kind of skipped over it when we were starting to kind of talk about things, but Fly on a Windshield and, just the whole first three tracks are like some of the absolute best in the Genesis catalog.
Yes.
Just the Fly on the Windshield, especially with just what's Hackett's comment or his vision about the sound of the track was like pharaohs sailing down the Nile. And it's like with that description and then with the music and how that just sort of pounds in, talk about your dripping mellotrons, my friend.
Yeah.
That has got it.
Well, yeah. And I mean, that track specifically, when the drums kick in, like when the heavy
Ooh.
section kicks in, that is literally when the fly hits the windshield, like bam, like
Yeah.
and splat, I mean, and
Hmm.
that's where the journey of self-discovery begins, kind of a thing, right?
Yeah,
Um,
or his descent into madness,
yes, yes,
whatever it might be.
whatever it might be, whether it was chemical induced, he wouldn't do that, would he? No.
I don't know. It's this weird thing where, somewhere along the way, Rail needs to find his brother John.
Yes.
Now, whether he really has a brother John in reality, or whether he's just like imagining the whole thing as some psychosis, who knows? But it's strange. Again, I don't know what Peter was doing back then, other than watching Jodorowsky movies and reading Carl Jung, but it definitely got him thinking on whole other
Well,
planes of storytelling.
he was very much into, and he still is very much into visuals
Yeah.
and how words can paint a story, right? Um, like a sentence strategically constructed and placed can sort of open your mind, to of perception into different realms, right? And
Yep.
he dove into this album head first. Like, I mean, swimming trunks and the whole bit, man, snorkel and
Oh yeah.
he dove in and he didn't want to come up until he was ready to come up. And I mean, we haven't talked about side four. I mean, 6 tracks in total. The Colony of Slipperman, the 3 sections on that. The Arrival, A Visit to the Doctor, The Raven. I mean, I'm listening to this thinking, what am I like? What is this? Originally, but I mean, and it's fair to say I should be noted too that the band has also said, Peter Gabriel has also said that there are weaker moments on the album. So,
Hmm.
I mean, I'm thinking he's referring to side four myself.
Could be. And again, I think I've said that, disc one is the stronger of the two. And yeah, there's definitely moments that aren't as catchy on disc two. I think Slipperman is a pretty darn strong starter to side four.
Yeah,
And the light dies down on Broadway is a good recapitulation of
it's a
the
tie-in.
main
Yeah,
theme
it's
of
a
the
good
album.
tie-in. Yeah,
Yeah.
to
And then when
wrap
you get
everything
to
up.
right, and then when you get to it, it's a great conclusion. But yeah, that just kind of leaves like Ravine and Riding the Scree and In the Rapids, and the writing the latter two definitely move the story forward to its what the heck is going on conclusion, but they're just kind of a bit wanting as far as like songs go.
Yeah, yeah. No, I would agree. Um, Tony Banks has said that how can I put this? They have performed obviously in the cage and the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, um, as standalone tracks.
Yep.
However, in concert. However, he doesn't like the fact um that you really can't perform any of the other tracks as standalones because it's out of context because of the storyline of the album. I mean,
Well, he said that, but yet, all their 1976 shows,
yeah,
the encore was it, merged with Watcher of the Skies, but it
yeah,
was the encore. They performed Lily White Lilith once in 1977 as the start of a show, and that was always kind of a head scratcher. But I got to disagree with Mr. Banks because I think tunes like Anyway or The Lamia could really stand out very strongly on their own. The Lamia, I think, is like the entire emotional center of the album, just
okay,
in terms of, the it's kind of the high point of the journey that Rail is taking and the danger that he's in and how he kind of moves through it. And it's so delicately played. I mean, if I recall correctly, the music for the Lamia was recycled from some earlier things they did, like in the late 60s. But boy, did they plucked that out and applied it beautifully to the Lamb here. I mean, Banks's piano work on both the Lamia and Anyway are absolutely stunning. And who that's probably the main reason why he didn't want to do it because he just doesn't like grand piano. He'd rather be farting around on an Oberheim or a synth or something. So
yeah. I think it's very safe to say that Tony Banks's uh, keyboard work is very prominent in the mix. Okay.
yeah, I mean, even on the original John Burns mix, I mean, it's hot, but I don't think it overshadows um other tunes. I mean, is there a tune that you're thinking of, Armando, where it feels like the keyboards and the guitars are sort of battling for prominence?
No, I do feel that no, I mean, I I watched the documentary on the reissue package that came out in 2007. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, each reissue CD for the reissue campaign through Warner and Atlantic contained a DVD containing a documentary on the making of said album of the associated album with the DVD. And um, Steve Hackett did say that he wished that there was more guitar, more of his guitar parts that were
Hmm.
kind of more prominent in the mix. At that point, he was sort of fighting to get his guitar parts put on the albums, and this album being one of them. And um, yeah, I just feel that there should be more balance in terms of guitar. I mean, there is guitar, don't get me wrong, like on Flying a Windshield. But
Yeah.
I think in certain tracks, there should be more guitar in the mix. That you know, not to take away from the keyboards and the synths, but I haven't heard the reissued versions of them on a proper stereo. I use my computer here, but
Mhm.
I just think that maybe there should be more, again, more prominent guitar use in the mixes, um, as Steve Hackett has said, and
Yeah.
um, you know, but hindsight is always 2020, right? I mean, well, let me ask you this: do you think that this album would have benefited from a three-sided release?
No, I think you would have still had to prune too much, or you would have had three very long sides.
Okay.
Um, again, I think sides one and two are just flawless.
Yeah. No, 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 top to bottom. No, no, exactly. No,
Yeah. Um, hmm. There was some comment that I was going to make, and it just left my head.
it's fine.
Don't know what
It's
it is.
fine. No, I mean, okay, so you're saying sides one and two are flawless. Would you, I guess, I don't want to trot over already spoken ground, but would you keep it the way it is, or if you were going to trim this down in certain spots, how could you, or would you? Yeah.
I think, you could I mean, you might be able to take away half of Hairless Heart and still get the effect of things. I suppose that if you really, maybe there's a part of Cuckoo Cocoon that you could excise, but not much of it. I mean, we're talking about like, you know, microaggressions against the album at this point. I mean, yeah, I don't think you could take away anything from side one. I think if you took away one of the songs, there would be something noticeably missing.
I think you're right. I think number one, if you would trim here, like say trim songs like Cocoon or Hairless Heart, it would be minuscule in terms of musical sections and stuff. So in essence, why would you? Because it wouldn't even make much of a difference
Exactly.
if you did.
Exactly.
Instead of a 94-minute, 17-second album, you'd have what, a 91-minute album?
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
Because you would
and what's the
still
big difference there? Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, I don't get this. Why people would say that. Again, it would be like, cutting the wall down to a single disc. You can't do it. I mean, because the songs are so intertwined, just like on this album, that
Yeah.
you would lose the story of it.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think the things that you could trim and not lose the narrative structure of the album would be on sides three and four. As nice and atmospheric as Silent Sorrow and Empty Boats is,
Yeah.
you could remove that. And again, it doesn't, I think it disrupts a musical flow, but it wouldn't upset what's going on from a narrative standpoint. And the same with Ravine.
Okay.
As I sort of think about it with, the end of Colony of Slippermen, where it's, watch him float away. And I think about, the beginning of The Light Dies Down on Broadway. I could hear those two segueing together and not
Okay.
causing anything, heinous. On the same token, I can also hear side three ending with the Lamia, and I'd be a completely happy camper. I mean, that song, I talked about Banks's keyboard work on that, but Hackett's guitar solo on the end is just absolutely fantastic.
Hmm.
Stellar work by Steve there,
Yeah.
and that's part of what makes it such an emotional center of the album between what Banks is doing musically, what Hackett's doing musically, what Gabriel is has written, and then how he's singing it. It's just fantastic all the way across.
Okay. Uh, let's talk about the production briefly.
Okay.
Um, the, Mike Rutherford has stated that this album has a much more of a clean production style or sound, with
Hmm.
regards to, basically everything. I mean, and he attributes that to the fact that they were recording in a living room setting, basically, right? Instead of as he called it, a stuffy studio. What do
Hmm.
you feel about the production on this album in terms of um, drums or guitars, etc.?
Well, I think all of John Burns' Genesis work is a little wanting. For me, the first um, you know, Trespass, Nursery Crime, Foxtrot, Selling England, and The Lamb, to me, they sort of come alive with the 2007 remixes that Nick Davis did.
Okay.
And that's, for people that, know me and, we talk about Genesis, that's almost sounds like it's you know, some sort of sin for me to say that because I'm such a vocal critic of how Nick Davis just completely butchered everything from A Trick of the Tail on. But the stuff he did with those first albums, I think it livened up and put like a fresh coat of paint on what John Burns did production wise. Um, it just gave it some life. I mean, for the Lamb, it's got such this weird, psychotic, psychedelic feeling to it that I was never really bothered by the production muddiness that I heard in it because I just took it as sort of part of the overall feel of the record. But when I think about that production muddiness and apply it to like Selling England by the Pound, that's where it kind of irks me because
Okay.
that album just cries for brightness and grandeur and things like that, whereas The Lamb is just this descent into, Dante's Inferno of psychological hell. So it's okay
Holy
for me
shit.
that
Okay.
it's okay for me that The Lamb has kind of suffered, production wise. But yeah, I've never been a fan of how those albums sounded until the 2007 releases.
Okay, because when I hear the album, and I remember Mike Rutherford's um, um, you know description of the album in terms of the production, I do find there are some tracks like Flying and Windshield where the drums come in prominently, like they're there, they're crisp, they're clean,
Hmm.
boom, like they're there, like it's there, it's in your face. But songs like the title track, uh, the drums are um, very soft. They're not as prominent in the mix.
Yeah. Hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think that maybe the album, I don't know if it's the recording techniques they had at the time. I just think that the album on that level kind of suffers a little bit.
And also, I hear what you're saying. What I don't know is that it also might have been a stylistic choice on by the band or by Collins,
Yeah,
because certainly during this period, Phil Collins was on fire in terms of his talent and his sensitivity and whatnot. He knew when to just cut loose and he knew when to hang back.
yeah,
The example that you gave there, I'd counter that with saying, well, yeah, listen to Back in New York City, and
yeah,
he's just all up front in that
yeah,
one.
yeah,
And Lily White Lilith, pretty much too has, a lot of good drumming going on in it. But yeah, I mean, this is um I would I might be incredibly naive about this, but I would just track that up into kind of like the artist's choice for how to
Could be. Yeah.
attack certain songs.
Yeah.
Um, when they became a four piece with Trick of the Tail, and certainly the drums became more prominent overall, and
Oh
that
yeah.
may be Henschel saying, "Oh, I want those drums louder," So
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, no. Um, I would agree with you. I would agree with you. Listening to it today again. Okay, you know, the title track, the drums like, oh, okay. I mean, they're there, but they're not as prominent. And then when you hear a fly in the windshield, they come crashing in like boom. It,
well, yeah, and
you
again,
know,
that's appropriate given what they were trying to do
to
with that
sonically
image of
with the
the fly
story.
hovering and bam.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get that. I get that.
And there's another factor about this album that we haven't talked about yet, and
Sure, let's
actually
talk.
I don't know how prominent it is, and that is Brian Eno, because
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
they
Yeah,
had
that's right.
Brian Eno come in and do some, Enosification on a few tunes.
Yes.
For my ears, I, I only really hear that on Grand Parade of Lifeless Packaging. It's possible it could be on Silent Sorrow and Empty Boats too, but do you have any more information on that?
No, I'm not sure as to which tracks he did work on. If
Hmm.
the guys watching, you can let us know in the comments below, like down there. Yeah.
Tell
Uh,
us. Be
what
stupid.
please let us know because it's never been mentioned. I do remember them talking about it and that, Phil Collins felt like he was being pimped out as a drummer because they were recording in the same place, right? And uh, Eno came in to do some production, do some work on, on some
Yep.
soundscapes and stuff. And then, Peter Gabriel turns around and tells Collins, okay, now you got to go to his studio and do some work for him. What you got to
Quid
do?
pro
Just play.
quo.
He's like, what do you got to do? He said, what do I have to do? Just play your drums. Oh, thank God. Okay, good.
Yeah.
And it was that kind of thing. Like he felt like he was being pimped out, to another artist because of
Yeah.
the help he gave. But yeah, I don't know the work that he had done on the album in terms of the tracks.
Yeah, I'm looking
Uh,
at our friend, the great big encyclopedia in the sky,
yes,
and it's only saying Grand Parade of Lifeless Packaging. It does say to add synthesized effects on vocals on several tracks,
yeah,
but it only lists specifically, Grand Parade.
yeah, because
If it
yeah, I mean, you hear his vocals done. Um, it was put through. Oh, that's right. The vocals were put through an ARP synthesizer
okay.
to give it that shimmering feel, that recorded shimmering kind of
Yeah, the whole
texture.
beginning of the song is that, he's like the parade master,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just crazy. It talks, it lends more to the psychosis. But as I think about it, maybe there's some vocal treatments on Cuckoo Cocoon. Maybe there's some vocal treatments on like Supernatural Anesthetist. In fact, it probably is. It's like if he wants you to snuff it, all he has to do is puff it. That's got some weird tweaky stuff going on
Yeah,
it. So maybe Eno was involved with that too.
yeah.
I think wherever Peter Gabriel sounds weird, that's where Brian Eno
He
strikes.
knows there. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Um, well, let's quickly talk about the 50th anniversary box set that is supposed to be coming out at some
Supposedly, I mean,
point.
at the
At
time that
some
we're
point.
recording it,
Yes.
there are rumors, and the rumors are um, they're not they're not hopeful if you're a Genesis fan. I'll put it like that.
Yeah.
Um, because it appears to be that the 50th anniversary release, and this is Banks talking about it on a podcast, is
Hmm.
going to be pretty much the album um, remixed, and the Shrine show from Los Angeles with the encores added. Now, that's that's all I know from what I can recall reading. I don't know if there's going to be a DVD with a 5.1 or a Blu-ray with a 5.1 or an Atmos or any of those things. I
Yeah.
don't know if the Shrine show has been remixed and the overdubs taken out. Um, and I don't know what's been done to differentiate this particular mix from the 2007 mix.
Mhm.
It certainly sounds like it's not going to be a treasure trove of demos, alternate versions, um, you know, outtakes that they recorded live where, there's like a 14-minute version of the waiting room. There's nothing, there appears to be no treasures like that.
Yeah, yeah. And ladies and gentlemen, the performance of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway at the Shrine Auditorium that was done in 1975 is also available on the Archives 67 to 75 package.
Yep.
The only thing that's different, according to Jim, is that they're adding on the encores. But you do get The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway done in its entirety. So you have that to look forward to. Now, in terms of release dates, there's nothing that's been made official as of yet.
Right.
It could be, we're approaching Christmas season. It could be released in I was going to say 1975. Listen to me. Could be released in 2025. So we have that to look forward to.
Yep.
Um, but yeah,
And I think there's supposed to be a formal announcement of the box set later in November. And Armando, my guess is that we're posting this video on the 50th anniversary of the Lamb. So who
happy
knows?
anniversary.
Happy
Seriously.
anniversary.
Um,
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you very much. So, but in terms of this box set that is coming out, like Jim said, if you're looking for a treasure trove of unreleased material, of live material from the time of the tour, unfortunately, that may not be the case.
Right.
So,
In fact, that kind of leads me to something else I was thinking about was, another of the holy grails that is out there somewhere people hope for is a high quality version of a performance of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. And the closest thing that we have to that is a recreation that Genesis put together that's on the DVD portion of the 2007 release, where you can go in and they've basically taken the tracks, and visually you can see the slides that they used. You can see a lot of still photography that was done for certain songs, whether it's close-ups or large shots of the stage. And
mhm.
there are a few filmed fragments throughout it, but that's the closest thing we have to replicating or presenting a film version of the Lamb stage show.
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately.
So, something like that would have been just the piece de resistance for
Yeah.
this set. But unless Banks is keeping something up his sleeve and he's going to surprise us all, I don't
Well,
know.
I don't know because according to, just to wrap this up, according to you know, Phil Collins and, other members of the band, out of the 100 shows,
Yeah, would
four,
you say there were four?
four that, everything went right, the projections, you know, changed at the right time. So, like you said, unless they're hiding something from us as fans that, that they want to spring on us, the 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 prospect of getting a video live performance of No Lamb Lies Down on Broadway in its entirety is probably slim to none. So there you have it, guys. A discussion on The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and also talking about the 50th anniversary edition that is supposed to be coming out sometime in the near future. When it comes out is anyone's guess, right? So I want to thank Jim for joining me on this fantastic, fascinating, engrossing conversation about the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Um, like I've said before, we've always tried to do shorter episodes. It doesn't work out. It never works out. So, and guys, please put in the comments below your views on the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Do you like it? Do you believe it's convoluted? Can you make sense of the storyline? And if you can, please let us know. Inquiring minds want to know. Do you know what I mean? I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm 54 years old. I can't make heads or tails of this stuff, okay? Um, in terms of the, narrative content. But the music for me is fantastic. Again, ladies and gentlemen, let us know what you think of the album. And, quick question. Would you cut it down? And if so, what tracks would you remove to make the narrative of the story flow, you know, effortlessly? And, or would you keep it intact? Right? We just,
I thought you were going to ask the audience to comment about what parts we should just shut up about so our videos can be shorter. But
no, 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 wasn't gonna say that. You just did. So so all right, ladies and gentlemen. Again, we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll be back with more episodes to tape. We are in the process of putting together ideas and about the film about I think 3 more episodes coming up. We are doing a Stephen Wilson album ranking. We
oh
are
yeah, we are,
doing
aren't we?
Oh, yes, we are. You forgot. How wonderful.
No, I'm playing with you.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And we are doing our top 5 albums on Gene Sibley. We are also going to be doing a new music discovery on the UK band Black Midi, who I've never heard of before. This is an idea of Jim's, and we are going to be filming that in a couple of days. So that's coming up. And once again, please click like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep yourselves on top of any new content I've got coming up. All right. And again, I want to thank Jim for joining me for this episode. It was fun.
That's
And
fun. I enjoy this.
I know you do. I know you do. I can tell you're so up for these episodes. Again, ladies and gentlemen, please look after yourselves and one another, and we will see you soon, very soon, with more videos. Bye for now.